The only other thing, beat Cyberpunk.
Nice.
Super enjoyed.
Is it good?
Yeah, and bugs were rife the whole time. In fact,
okay, so now that you're done and you've bugged it out real hard.
Oh man,
I'm gonna say it once more for people in the back. When you have a PC save file that you pull mods off of, that save file is probably fucked forever. Pulling mods off does not make everything back to pristine state.
Yeah, that could be the case. Although, again, I did go and start a fresh one.
It was fresh on PS5?
I did the transfer over for the character, because I had the character model or whatever early on in. But after a point, I just made a fresh character.
Okay.
So the game is still busted as. And I saw, like, even people were going into threads going like, oh, is this a SSD issue or installed on a secondary thing? And it's like, no.
That was a PS5 version, right?
Right. This is a console. And they're like, oh, yeah, even on a secondary drive. Like, no, nothing's on any secondary drive. Like, the game is built in, like, shit. And you can see it falling apart. And you can try to reach for any other reason why I did something stupid and fucked up the process here, but what you're seeing is the game running on a PS5 and running like shit. I don't know what else to tell you. You know,
a broader question.
You can get
this actually like relates a lot more to my life than you would think. So you and Paige are the only two people I've ever met in my life like this. And I don't know what it is about the both of you, but you both produce what I would call never before seen results.
Yeah, I don't know.
Every time you interact with technology, which I have walked out of a room and heard a noise and like a fucking device will be on fire and Paige will be like, I didn't even touch it.
Yeah. Made me a great
QA.
What
is going on?
Made me a great QA tester. I was really good at my job. I was very good at QA. That's that's the best I can say. But the start of this whole thing, because you just reminded me, because I kind of forgot about it until you brought up the whole save file bit, but the amount of fucking audience gaslighting on, no, you idiot, it's your fault for doing it whatever way you did because you heard old news or was some of the most frustrating, annoying bullshit. It was so stupid and shitty. I hated that. That sucked, right? When I'm like, fucking clean the thing, boot the game up, buy it, start the game, make save, go, and has nothing to do with it, because what happens is word travels slowly and things, whatever I say. So you hear about you're doing the Mass Effect thing again and you're doing mods. Why are you doing mods? You don't want to do the respec, whatever. Okay, fine, right? All that mess comes and goes and we go, all right, fine, fuck all that. Let's just go with the PS5 console version. There shouldn't be any issues there. And like after that point, it doesn't matter. Everything I do is stupid in some way that's going to be a problem. And like I hate that shit, man. I'm playing on a clean file and the game's fucking up and you got to go like, no, it's because you installed it to an external hard drive on your PS5 or some shit. Fuck off.
That shouldn't matter.
Right? That sucks. Don't be an asshole. Anyway, the game is done.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry if I came off extra critical.
No, it reminded, no, it's more like the amount of bullshit going on at the beginning of that was like, anyway, it completely unreasonable for, we have moved on to an entirely different like setup that has nothing to do with how I was playing it on PC, and there are still problems, but because it's me, they're all my fault, no matter what I do. Okay, that's a fair take. That's reasonable, sure, you know? Anyway, the game is done, and I definitely enjoyed how going through it, the choices you make with with a lot of these characters are, they weigh on your decisions in any, like, I imagine a good Western RPG always has these moments of like gray with all the characters, and you follow.
CD Projekt's like particularly good at it.
They're so vaguely like, oh, you can't feel good about helping anybody. You can't.
For the Witcher games, they have a really excellent time making sure you never get a clean win. Like you can get like, yeah, you know what? I got most of the things I wanted. And they're like, okay, but this part that you don't like actually that came along with that.
Yeah, it's very clear that like Night City is, of course, your main character. Therefore, you should not feel good about you should not feel clean. If you feel too clean morally about your decisions, maybe you're not considering a certain part of it, right? If you're like, yeah, let's go with Johnny all the way, right? He's right, and we got to fight the powers because corpos suck. And you're like, what about the fucking bodies that got cooked with a nuke?
No, man, don't you get it?
And that applies across the board, and so like when it came to Phantom Liberty, I'm not gonna like spoil any of the choices, but some people were confused by like the way I played it and like why I did what I did, and like kind of like we're going like, oh, did you think this or that or whatever? And I eventually clarify in terms of like what I did and why I did it, because they completely filled in the gaps on something that was not the case with why I chose to help and not help certain people and why. But something that also happens in games sometimes when you have a crucial decision to make is like there's the way you would decide in real life, and then there's the video game version where you're like, narrative stories sometimes give you a little invisible thread where you would expect there to be none. Sometimes they give you a little ladder, and it's like, oh, if you find it, then maybe you can, but you have now closed the door to all ladders. So the idea of like letting that kind of like, maybe I can find a way out if I keep fighting to find that way out, happens in video games a lot.
So how far did you get into Baldur's Gate 3?
Everyone joined the party.
Did you get to the second act? Just tell me if you got to Act 2.
No, we didn't get to Act 2, no.
Okay, so at some point in Act 2, I encountered a scenario that is very similar to what you describe, in which, how would I actually deal with this in my personal life if I was a Dungeons and Dragons character? I would make an impassioned plea and just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk forever, right? Because that's how I try and solve intractable problems. I just keep talking until it's solved, or everyone tells me to shut up.
Rhetoric up.
And in Baldur's Gate 3, I grasped the tiniest implication of a hint of a whisper to maybe not do that, and then didn't.
Okay.
And that was not how I would have ever, in almost any other game, done that.
Yeah. Because it all depends on the creator of the game and how they view the world and what they, want that to be, right? But there are cases where, a game will be like, make a choice here. None of them feels great. And like, you gotta internally go, all right, I'm going with this and I'm standing by it, and here are the reasons why, because ethically this is worse, or whatever the case is, But then when there's those moments where it's like picking the one that seems wrong or seems like more selfish or whatever the case is, but then there's a little like, but if you struggle, you can find that way out or so, always makes me go, oh man, well now you can just as easily go, you're an idiot for giving up when you shouldn't have given up, right? That's the kind of the idea. It's like some people write stories in a way where it's like, never give up no matter what. And some people write stories in a way where it's like, no, there's a time and place to give up and accept that because life is hard. And you don't know who you're dealing with and what kind of story they're telling you,
So let me ask you, because I played I only really played the first chapter of Cyberpunk, right? One of the things the Witcher series does very excellently is they give you decisions that don't really seem all that important, only for you to later realize that they did have more value than they expected. And it's not like, well, because you went to the bar instead of the graveyard, so and so died. Right? It's this affected your relationship with the character, and therefore the character had a different motivation and the character went on.
Okay, this game is the opposite. This game has multiple choices that always feel drastic, even when you have a way out after you've committed to them. Sometimes you make a drastic choice that feels like binary, but then you can still RPG your way into a different outcome. And then sometimes with the moment you choose it, it's set,
So Witcher 3 does something really interesting. Its ending is incredibly opaque in its how you get it. There's no like choose the color of your juicy fruit like Mass Effect at the end of it. Like Witcher 3's ending is a direct culmination of acts that happened like way back, like a dozen hours beforehand. And so you arrive at your ending, and it is the that you built for yourself and prescribed for yourself.
Yeah.
And then it gives you like little flashbacks to the choices that you made that mattered.
Okay.
And none of them were presented as if they were important at the time.
Interesting. Okay.
All of them were like really, really simple. The one of the most interesting ones, and this is just, do you accompany someone to a conversation that should be private, or do you let them do it by themselves?
Okay.
And miss out on the cutscene.
Right.
And that's one of those things that like leads in. And it represented this thing where people like got to the end, and some people were like outraged that they got the ending that they got because it was like a downer, or it was like not what they wanted. And then what did you do here, and here? And played your Geralt like an asshole. But you were given like a dozen opportunities, and you played him like an emotionless, callous freak.
Okay.
So the ending is going to represent that.
Okay, interesting. So two things that come to mind here. One, there's one major part of the game that does what you're describing, which is your relationship with Johnny in the game is very subtle, and you're like putting him down or agreeing with him, or what you say, choosing to chew him out or not, are all decisions that matter, that are much more subtle compared to the other relationships and choices you make, right? There's a lot of like life and death, walk away or stay here, kill or don't kills. And with Johnny, it's kind of like we're having conversations about whether or not we like each other, and whether or not I trust you, you know? And there's an actual Johnny meter when you pause the game to see what percentage.
Oh man, how much Johnny you got?
Know? So that one part of the game is treated differently, and it's cool how subtle that is, right? In contrast, what you're describing is like, I would say that, like, not in defense of this, but if the game presents itself with enough robustness in its quest making and giving, that you don't feel like playing it like a video game and turning your brain off is just the optimal way to go, right? Exploring all dialogue options, and then, you know, as opposed to like commit to the one and never say the others, right? You know, games where it's like you have 5 things to say and you can always go back and hear them all and it won't mean anything, versus the game that's like, no, the one that you said matters and the others go away. But what about the game where you say the one that matters, but you can go back and say the others, and saying this one makes them like you less, and you just did it to explore what the character would say, but now you've created a consequence.
I'm a big fan of that, actually. Right? I'm a big fan of like, hey, don't ask me about my face.
Yeah,
and you can go through all the discussions, and then you ask about your face. Like, I fucking told you not to ask me about it. You fuck off.
So it depends, but you don't know what the game is like and who's making it and why they're making it in that way, right? And if you have these unintended consequences where, you know, it's kind of like when I talk about a game has stealth, and you're like, okay, what does this video game consider stealth? Is it lighting? Is it crouching?
Stealth can be
Is it crawling? Is it sound? Is it line of sight? How many different things are this video game taking into account so that you don't have to just crawl at the slowest possible pace, out of sight in the dark, in the bushes, you know, to still be invisible? You don't know what matters or what doesn't. And the moment you do, you just game the system, because video games work that way. So what you're describing at its worst, in my opinion, let's go back to it for a second, the fucking hold the line system in Mass Effect 2, right? Where the whole game plays a certain way, but in the finale, all of a sudden, you want to get subtle about things. You want to be more deep and interesting about what the representation of these characters is than the rest of the game applied. And now these invisible metrics kick in a way that's abysmal because you've been playing the game with zero amount of this subtlety.
I think,
and it falls apart. Nightmarish.
I think that the suicide mission in Mass Effect 2 exists in 2 states. There are 2 versions of that system, and there's nothing about the system that changes. Like, it's all the same numbers. The question is its context. Playing Mass Effect 2's suicide mission within like the month of its release, with no plans to play the 3rd game, is very different than playing through that suicide mission as part of the Mass Effect trilogy. Because one is, oh man, that was a crazy ending I got. I can't believe Thane and Mordin didn't make it. Oh, rip in peace, guys. Versus, oh, let me look up the numbers so I can do it again so that everyone can survive, so that everyone can talk to me on the Normandy for the third game. Those contexts dramatically changed everything about how that works.
Yeah.
Nobody rolled into a fucking file Mass Effect 3 with only Shepard alive. You freaks.
The absolute obtuseness, you know? It's the writing equivalent of the moment where you have to walk up to the party in the James Bond mission, and where you have to walk up to a window and shoot it to break the glass. And I remember I was describing this as like, pause, let's talk about game design. Is glass breaking anywhere in this series a part of the franchise at all? Is shooting through glass anywhere in our brains in this world? Or have we internalized the idea that glass is just glass and then you have to move around it or whatever, right? So why this one sudden moment of shooting the glass? You're crazy. You're crazy if you train the player to expect something and then suddenly go, no, do the other thing. That's real life, isn't it? And you're like, you asshole, you're a video game and we know there's limitations. And I can understand when like drawing assumptions about things are going to lead you down, you know, a well, and you could use that as a trap in a way where if you expect the game to play a certain way and then they can use that against you to subvert your expectations, that's cool sometimes, right? It depends on how you execute it, right? But the moment I'm describing with the way the rest of that game played was such a like, this is not at all the same thing. This is not what I've been doing for the last few hours. This is super weird to expect the person to intuitively just come to this conclusion. And that's what's going on in that fucking obtuse ass suicide mission, you know? Like, you can't suddenly at the last minute decide you want your game to be more subtle and deep than it actually is. So if you're describing The Witcher in a way where from the jump you get a sense that the game cares about and or is paying attention to things that you otherwise might overlook in other games like this, that's good, because then you're like, I'm on edge the whole time I'm playing this and thinking a little bit more about it. Kind of like in Disco when you fucking trip over the old lady and do the double deuces. Right off the bat, I'm like, oh, failure is something special in this game, you know?
So the very first choice in Witcher 1 is the Kaer Morhen is being attacked by goons who are trying to steal all the Witcher's magic bullshit. And they go, okay, do you go down to the basement to head off the goons? Or do you fight off the gigantic fucking monster that's attacking your friends? And that is that just seems like it wouldn't matter all that much, right? You fight the big monster and you get like the monster parts, which can get you an upgrade. But then you get to the bottom and discover, oh, they had extra time to steal more shit. And enemies in later missions will be more mutated as a result because they got to steal more Witcher bullshit because you were busy.
Okay. Yeah. And you find those consequences out like how soon?
A full chapter later. Like 12 and a half hours later.
Okay.
Like way
in there,
way too late.
In there you find out.
Change your mind.
Okay. Because again, like, it's like I'm not against, you know, game design and the writing and such, planning that to be the case, but you can't go one full way and 180 at the last second and expect a good result there and expect people to enjoy that, you know? So all this to say that you know, in a game like Cyberpunk, when you like, the more you kind of the more you kind of feel self-satisfied with the choices you make, I think perhaps the more wrong you're going about this. You shouldn't feel okay with any choice you're making, you know, for most, at least for the major players in terms of who you're supporting and what. But with that, I think it's great. I think it's very cool, and I like the journey through this world. The one thing I will say that, like, I don't know, maybe I was expecting a bit much, or maybe CD Projekt playing, you know, taking a world that already existed in the original Cyberpunk tabletop universe and then expanding on it, didn't want to, like, you know, crack open the sausage too much, right? I'm not sure, but there's a couple moments in the game where I found talking with like Johnny and a couple other characters, and throughout the LP, like I'm like the idea of how cheap and disposable life is in Night City is such an interesting discussion to me, right? And it's the part that hits the hardest, and it's the moment in Edge Runners episode fucking 1 where David gets handed a package, and it's like, yep, here you go, here's the remains, bye.
It's like life isn't cheap. Like life has actually no value at all.
Therefore, if we're going to care about people, who should we care about and why? Right? What is the world's viewpoint on this? Is the giant fucking, pen in the sky as cynical as the world within it, or does it say to like have meaningful relationships with who you can for the time you can because that's all you get, right? Or is there something else to it? I don't know, right? But I'm always curious to find out what the players and pieces on the board feel about the game that they're in. And
do you feel like this applies to like runners or like literally every person in Night City?
In this game, you get to experience, you know what runners' lives are like, and then in this game, you get to experience life as a solo, right? So you know how bullshit that can be. But the average person just wandering about the streets, going about their life, is suffering horribly because every time you do an NCPD mission, every time you do a cyber psycho hunt, every time you do a fucking random side mission of gig of any kind, it's filled to the brim with normal people living normal lives, dying for no reason because life means nothing in the city.
I mean, to be fair, that's like kind of like regular life.
Sure, there's not death races drifting around with people gunning full speed Mad Max at each other around.
I mean, we're not quite there yet.
The Dakari Expressway is not getting me riddled with bullets for going for a hot dog just because I went to the wrong street. But
people do live in like Los Angeles. Like that is like.
But there are places, right? Make no mistake. Some places are more death race than others. But yeah, the overall feeling that you get is like, if you think this is localized to people who are like, oh, you picked a dangerous life, right? Live by the sword, but die by the sword. No, this is everybody, right? It's
no, because there's a crazy amount of collateral damage all over the place.
Nonstop. Insane amounts, And overall, you get that whole, again, the corpse on top being like, whatever, cost of doing business. We don't give a shit. And that's the vibe. So how the pieces on the board feel about the pieces, about the game they're in, is like, I love that. That's such meat on the bone, And that's why I love Kreia so much, because she has the most shit to say about the world she's in, right? That's why she's my favorite fucking Star Wars character, because, oh my God, spit, Granny, spit.
I think Kreia is one of my favorite Star Wars characters, but for like maybe the opposite reason that you're saying right now.
Maybe.
Like Kreia believes that at the end of Kreia is like South Park made manifest in fucking what do you call it? In Star Wars, where like she would rather complain about how everything is stupid and dumb than actually do anything. Like she's wrong at the end of the day.
But she wants to, she is wrong, but there is something she wants to do. And the deal is that her version of the world that she lives in, basically, what if Johnny is shitting at the corpse, but the corpse are a walking, living, breathing group of people called Jedi and Sith?
Yeah.
The world we live in is shaped by these assholes. Who are the assholes? Arasaka and Militech? No! The fucking Jedi and the Sith. We don't give a shit about your stupid war. We're trying to live normal lives, and we fucking suffer because you're too busy having your religious bullshit, which, and going off, and we don't give a fuck, man. Don't kill me and my family. It's interesting, right? And so I'm super, like, always down to hear the cracking open of that idea in the world and where that goes, right? And Johnny's like, so let's drop the nuke and fuck plans. Let's just go for it. Who cares? And you're like, okay, Johnny, like, is frying collateral damage, aka called protein, is getting more protein involved in the terrorist attack a good idea, And you kind of run into other people who are similarly minded, and you go, oh, how badly do you want to make your point here, right? Because if you're down to fucking fry entire innocent families for simply standing in the way to make your point, maybe
Don't you get it, man? It's about the system.
Right? Maybe
These are all just cogs in the machine, bro.
Right? And maybe I don't want to stand next to you while you're spouting off about that, right?
Maybe I just want to like pretend that I just met you outside and that I don't really know you.
You know, yeah, we agree on the problems, but do we agree on the solutions? It's very important that we agree on the solutions. You know, there's a lot of that in the world today where, oh, you and I, oh, we agree on the problem. Oh, that's nice. What are your solutions? Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Right. I'll be over here. Go fuck yourself. You're just as bad, right? So I kind of was hoping to see that get cracked open a little bit, and it dances and touches, but it doesn't quite fully lean into that amount.
Smart enough to engage on this topic in the level that you want him to,
no,
or her to.
And V doesn't have to get to that point. It just needs to happen in the logs we're reading. It has to happen in the conversations in the background. It has to happen when you're chatting with the leaders of the Militech or Arasaka corporations, or you know what I mean. We need to kind of just give me something to chew on, you know. And there was a lot to chew on. And I didn't scrape the game to 100%. And there's always like fun little bits and pieces of lore that I was missing. And when I'd find stuff off camera and read it, I'd be like, "Ooh, yeah, okay, that's good stuff," you know? But the narrative of the main story of V was not about what I'm describing, you know? It touched on it because that's what life in Night City is. And it's interesting that like Edge Runners is kind of distilled into that one screenshot, you know, the one. And that's kind of what people feel, and they like that when it's like, oh, that song starts playing and people feel a way about that song because of what it makes them feel. That's exactly it, right? I'm like, why do we feel that about this, and do we feel that about that, you know? And there's a part of this too where, of course, you're a video game character, so you're going to go through this in Tomb Raider mode, like mowing down a cult of people on an island, you know, where like you're like, okay, the story wants to pretend she killed like 4 people, but it's closer to 400, you know. So all this to say that, like, without scratching that most interesting itch of the cyberpunk world, I still was satisfied with where the game goes and how you get there. You know, and then, you know, beyond that, you kind of just like a lot of it depends on how hyped are you for fuckboy Johnny to just be a fuckboy and be wrong and have a point, but be super wrong about it. Do you enjoy that aspect, you know? And then within that too is like, do you want to, you know, kind of just, how much are you enjoying being in this setting and this world, scanning things, looking at the different cultures as they crash into a cyberpunk world? Yeah, right. So we get to see Buddhist monks mixed in with a cyberpunk setting. Awesome. Right? Japanese like zaibatsus crashed into a cyberpunk setting. Quintessential, has to be there, you know? And all these little bits and pieces where you get that the voodoo boys, the Haitian culture crashed into a cyberpunk world. Super fun to see. Does that just like feed your brain and give you the right synapses firing, the jitters? Okay, cool. You're gonna enjoy the ride regardless.
So let me ask you a question. You had a very, it sounds like you had an excellent overall time with Cyberpunk, and you're extremely happy with what you got out of it.
I recognize the flaws for what they are, and I also right, and there are bigger flaws I didn't touch on yet, mind you. But in terms of just getting the feeling of this world right, and walking away from it going like, oh man, it fucking sucks to live there. Yeah, they nailed it.
But also you had like fun playing it, like it was an enjoyable romp, and you were like, yeah, good. CD Projekt makes good game.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I'll, with an asterisk, but go ahead.
So that's my lead up. So with that being said, and the technical problems that you ended up having multiple years after the game's release, how excited are you to hop on Witcher 4 day one? Because let me tell you, man, as somebody who's ridden this ride 4 times,
every single one, huh? Every single one. I am
done. Every single game they have ever put out, massively, crazy fucked up. Like fucked up enough that I was like, I'm gonna wait like a year.
Yeah, no reward for early adoption. Um, if you can, deal with dodging big lore points and
I'm
potential,
watching a tech demo of Witcher 4 today, going, I will play this game when my son is in high school.
Is it usually a big patch that gets announced, or is there like a proper re-release where you go, that's
It
the
is
step?
it traditionally it's called the enhanced edition.
Okay, the
But
the
this
re-release.
time around it came with Phantom Liberty, but they didn't call it enhanced edition. They called it version 2.0. You remember that?
Yep. Um,
Um,
well, so what I'll say to some of the stuff I kind of wanted out of the game that I didn't get gameplay wise is like it's almost, I don't want to ask too much or be unrealistic in the demands, but one thing that I went into the game kind of like, initially I was kind of overwhelmed. I don't know if you remember my first sessions being like, oh man, there's so much and I don't know how to handle all these choices and builds and stuff. And then when I went off camera and I went through it and I kind of came back and I went, oh, you get 3 classes. 3 OSs are going to decide the majority of how you play. And then on top of that, you can pepper that with melee weapons of different kinds or different guns, but for the most part, your OS determines what you are. And I wish there was more, I wish there was more variety to that. I wish that maybe you could choose to dual wield and pick a gun with a different gun, or
well, I mean, there's the 3 classes: swords, alchemy, and magic. I'm sorry, we're talking about Cyberpunk. I meant melee, shooting, and magic.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, I mean, in this case, fucking time stop, melee and magic. So, and then it turns out that back in the original game, the classes were based on your job. So you could be, like, your whole playstyle was based on, are you a, like, medic?
That makes sense.
That's your gig. That's what you do. And then everything else after is a sub-choice from that. But this story about a particular person going through a particular adventure, it would be way too ambitious and way too hard to be like, oh yeah, here, this is a, you're a corpo that spends the whole game being a corpo, but still have the story of V. It wouldn't make sense with the way the game's designed. So I you kind of go like, I understand why they did, and I look forward to seeing how they expand on what they do. Maybe more subclassing, because again, you can pick up a sword and still hack things. You can, grab a whip that hacks people, or pick up a gun and do berserker stuff. But more implicit, like, baseline variety, I think would be a lot of fun, even if it means like taking out how far down the path, the road you go, and making it a little more shallow, but widening the base. And then I go, oh my god, fucking Larry in Baldur's Gate 3, though. That's you can't expect anyone to hit that.
More subclasses.
You can't expect anyone to do that. That's unfair. That's an unrealistic amount of open,
and if you want to go even further, you can be like, you can look at a game like Pathfinder, Kingmaker, Wrath of the Righteous, and be like, here is more subclasses, abilities, feats, etc. than you could ever hope to possibly understand, but you're trading that for a game that like fucking barely works for multiple years.
But when you're not doing that stuff, you're walking through somewhere in the city and conversations around you are great and interesting, and you're picking up garbage that tells you about the setting and fun stuff is happening around, and you're like, yeah, this is cool. And what I would say too is, like, my own personal love for the genre, and that's sort of like, what's rad about it. This is the part where in an open world game, I might get bored already by seeing the pieces. You can see where the NPCs spawn and walk in their circles. You can see where the chariots, cars, or horses spawn and then run throughout. And you're kind of like, yeah, okay, we get it. It's big, it's empty. There's story happening over there, but there's a whole lot of nothing in between. And in this case, I'm like, no, like, there's enough in this that's like cool about the setting that kept my interest peaked, even off camera.
I think CD Projekt makes really incredible spaces. Like, I think even in Witcher, I think Witcher 1 takes place entirely in the city of Vizima. And it is like a 2000s era PC game in which characters like are characters that walk around are like completely faceless, nameless, like whatevers. In fact, there's only like 10 separate character models. And the people you actually have to talk to mostly stay in one spot. it's a really great interior space.
Okay.
Like it is a really fantastic explorable space, even within its own limitations.
And so I'm curious because like when you walk around, I don't know, fucking random like Just Cause. You're not expecting to be like, ooh, look at this city and its living, breathing vibes.
No, the city is there to be blown up.
Fucking whatever, right? And then I know that the earlier GTA games, certainly you kind of like, you see the bones for what the city is at a certain point and it stops being interesting. Does a game like Red Dead Redemption actually have interesting things happening out in the wilds where with random animals and forests and dark, in the woods? Like, is the money in that game keeping the like spaces interesting in the same way that you're describing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. You can do that.
You picked the one.
Where they
picked the single example
they did
that
it
proves the point in the other direction.
Okay, no, I'm legit. No, because I'm legitimately curious because I know not every studio does this, right? Some places just like go like grab tree generation, grab grass, and stretch a mile in that direction and go. And this in Cyberpunk, you're like, what the fuck does that sign say? What is this conversation happening? There's enough interesting going around that you don't kind of feel that,